Today I'm going to try my hand again at canning pints of beans. Sure, dry beans keep really well on the shelf, but I need some fast food. When I don't feel like cooking or I need to put a quick meal together, I want to grab a jar of beans. Now, if you've been following me, you'll remember that I canned a whole bunch of black beans and they turned out really mushy. This time I'm not following the USDA canning guidelines. You do you, but that didn't work for me. That was very disappointing. I want beans that actually hold their shape and look like beans. The USDA recommended guidelines made my beans really mushy, which is great if you want a lifetime supply of refried beans. I have that now, so I'm moving on with different kind of canning. My subscriber Tim recommended this method, and then I did a ton of research, and I think this is going to be the method for me. Before I get started, I wanted to give you a little tour of my tote that I keep in my house. Now, I have many canning supplies in my storage, but I wanted to tell you what I keep in-house and why. Rings, both sizes, just a selection. Because you sometimes need to grab a ring for storage, or if you're doing small batch canning like I am, I need some rings. Of course, my jar lifter, which I'm going to need for today. Canning funnel. I'm not fancy, but you know, if you have a fancy one, that's great. Debubbling and headspace measuring tool. Love this thing. And I keep my canning salts with my pickling and canning salt with my canning supplies. That way I don't have to go to a separate location. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so pretty much everything goes in a plastic Ziploc bag. It's really moist here. It helps to keep the salt flowing. I keep my canning salt in another little jar just because these big boxes have these terrible cardboard pour spouts, and it's no fun to try to measure out of this. I just keep refilling another little jar. So I keep those together in my Ziploc bag. Of course, I keep my new canning lids in a Ziploc bag in my canning basket. I also keep both sizes of used lids. These are great if I'm storing dehydrated or freeze-dried food. I don't reuse these for canning. I know some people do, but I can't do that. I don't trust them. I wouldn't trust them for that. But I did order some of the Harvest Guard reusable lids, so when they come, we'll do another canning video and see how they work. I'm pretty excited about a lid that lasts a lifetime. I think that's cool. But I'm going to tell you why I keep such an assortment of used lids. I don't throw these away unless they're in terrible condition. But I am a big fan of finding secondhand jars, getting secondhand jars. If you find a lot of jars at a yard sale, you are going to have to pay for them in some way. Like if you get a really good deal on jars, it's going to cost you in labor. So if I get brand new jars, of course I store them with the silver lid or the lid that came with it. When I see the silver showing out, I know that this is a brand new jar. If I find a jar that's just hanging out without a lid on it, I don't trust that jar. It's either been given to me by my grandma, or I bought it at a secondhand store, or I found it at a yard sale, or whatever. If that's the case, then I can't trust this jar because it hasn't been through the MISTI ultra sanitation process. What does that require? Like several washings, scrubbing. Sometimes I break out the cleanser, I soak it with vinegar water, and then I'll boil them. When I think they're clean to the eye, then I boil them for 10 or more minutes in my water bath canner. Once it's gone through that process, I want to know that that jar's gone through that process. So I store my ultra sanitized jars, or jars that I have purchased new and I trust, with the used lid out. So if I see this lid, I know it's gone through the process. Also, it's not sitting in storage collecting spiders and dust. It's staying clean inside. If I see it like this, I know it's a new jar. If I see it without a lid, I know I need to do more for that jar. So that's why I keep old lids, and also they just come in really handy. So that's my little trick for myself. That's how I talk to myself with my jars. That sounded crazy, but it really works. Getting secondhand jars can be a great way to invest in your future for very little money down. Of course, you'll have to put time in cleaning those jars, but once you have those jars to where you want them, they'll just keep repaying your initial investment in time and money. You want to hold any jar up to the light, inspect the bottom and the sides for any nicks or cracks, because you don't want to can with those, any obvious bubbles or issues. Not only do you want to inspect the top rim, but also the ring, where the ring slides on, for any chips, nicks, or cracks. Sometimes people who don't know how to open a canning jar can break the jar on that raised edge where the ring spins on. So it's important to really look at your jars, the jars you already own, but also any jars you're considering purchasing. You can buy jars at secondhand stores right now for about 50 cents a piece, sometimes less. Yard sales are a great way. State sales are an awesome way to get used jars, and it is really, really worth your time to make sure that you're not purchasing damaged jars, because you're just going to be spending a lot of time washing and sanitizing a jar you literally can't use anyway. That being said, it's not common to find cracks. It's more common to find little chips. But even then, most of the time, I find perfect jars. So be on the lookout for jars. Many of my jars were handed down to me from my grandma Leonetta, and I plan on giving those same jars to my kids. So jars, they're great secondhand. Today I'm going to, and thanks Tim for the advice on this, I'm going to do the no soak method, and I'm doing 7 pint jars, 2 jars of black beans, 3 jars of white beans, 1 jar of this yellow bean that I grew last summer, and 1 jar of the Hidatsa red that I grew last summer. I'm using my gateway canner, aka the Presto digital pressure canner. I already have the water filled up to the line, and I already have all of my pint jars ready to go, filled up half full of water. I'll bring you over here and show you what's going on. Okay, we're going to set it for pressure can, and it's going to ask me minutes. 75 for pints, 90 for quarts. It's going to tell me to insert my jars. That means it wants to warm up my jars for me. So I'm going to put in 7 jars that are half full of the same temperature water that I already have in here. This has a fill line. I believe it's 3 quarts, and so I'm using the same temperature water for both the jars and the water that's in here. Once that's in, you want to install your lid and remove the regulator. This is the regulator. We don't want that on right now. You're going to advance it to the next step by hitting the play button. It's going to say warm, and it will warm up your jars. That's a great opportunity for you to set up your station for canning. Okay, it's beeping at me and telling me to fill the jars. My little trick is you need hot water to pour over your beans. I'm pouring the water from the jars that I just heated up into this pitcher, and I'm going to reuse this water. It's perfectly clean water. There's no point in pouring that water down the sink to heat up more water. I will need more water. I have some water going on the stove. Follow along with me. You don't know this, but Mark is in the kitchen with me right now. He is making breakfast. So if you hear Mark noises, don't be jelly. I'm going to have avocado toast later. So if you hear cooking noises in the background, it's okay. If you hear the dog barking, it's okay. You're being invited into the chaos of my life, and that is part of it. Okay, for this method, there is no soaking the beans. I did rinse them out. A half a cup in each pint jar and a cup of dry beans in each quart jar. I like to do it in pint jars because I want to simulate like a store can of beans, which is about the same amount. because all beans process at the same time. 75 minutes for pints, 90 minutes for quarts. I am doing a variety of beans because why not? I just want a few beans on my pantry shelf. I don't need, you know, to prepare for the apocalypse. I have that already in my dried beans. In each jar, I'm going to put a half a teaspoon of pickling salt or kosher salt. You don't want to use iodized salt. It's impressive how quiet Mark is being. He's like stealth cooker over there. To each pint jar, I'm putting a half of a teaspoon of canning salt. If I was doing quarts, it would be a full teaspoon. There are also some pretty awesome recipes out there to make fiesta beans and other beans. You can add different seasonings. My subscriber Tim suggested a bouillon cube. I'm going totally simple today. Just salt. And then add your hot water, and you want 1 inch of headspace. Turns out I didn't need my canning funnel. You can measure 1 inch by eye, or you can use this handy dandy measuring tool. If you've canned enough, you know what 1 inch looks like. Once you put your water in, don't forget to put your debubbler in there and make sure that there's no air in your beans. It's kind of easier with dry beans than it is with pre-soaked beans. Then you clean your jars after you put the liquid in. This can also be stock or broth. Put your lids on, and you want to just do finger tight. And a lot of people struggle with this. For me, I'm not really cranking down on it. For Mark, that's probably going to be different. But I just want to go, I turn the lid until it just starts to really tighten, and then I go a little tiny bit more. That's for me. You will have to practice this. You don't want to over tighten, and you also don't want to under tighten. You will know that. See how it kind of just turns off fairly easy? Goes on kind of easy. So that's finger tight. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but there's plenty of people on the internet who can maybe explain it to you the way you need to hear it. Okay, my jars are filled. They are in this pressure canner. It's time to put the lid on and hit the play button. Again, the regulator is still off. Now it's heating up. It will get to a point where this is just shooting steam out of the little green spout here, and also right here where the regulator goes. And it will give you a countdown of 10 minutes when that happens, when it really starts putting pressure out. At the end of that 10 minutes, it will beep and tell me to put the regulator on. So I'll see you in about 20 minutes or so. To you, it will seem like no time passed at all. It's the magic of editing. See where it sits doing a countdown right now? It says 10 minutes. So in the after this 10 minutes is over, then I will put the regulator on. It's beeping, time to put on the regulator. That steam that's shooting out is so hot. So, you know, put on an oven mitt if you're not comfortable. I just drop it on like that and then push it on both sides. Make sure that that little dial is pointing to canning. That makes sense, right? Now I'm gonna hit the play button and advance it to the next round. It's going to say 75 minutes and canning. I can let it go. It's going to do its thing. I can go do other things now. Yay, me! Hey, it's the next day, and our no-soak beans are ready to be checked out. So let's just see if they sealed. This one, I don't think so. Well, looks like we're going to be checking these beans out. This one didn't either. What a bummer. These new lids, not a big fan. I ordered some Harvest Guard lids, but it seems like lately, in the last couple years, the lid failure has been sort of tremendous. But that's okay. I eat a lot of beans, so the couple that didn't seal will get eaten up. Let me grab a fork and see if I like the no-soak method better. I'm going to give the navy beans a try. Well, they look firmer, which is ideal. They're perfect. They're perfect. Thanks to Tim and everybody else that suggested that I try the no-soak method. I'm going to tell you, Oh my gosh, that's so good. This method is not recommended by the USDA, but like I said before, I'm not a cowboy canner, and I'm not, follow everything to the letter. I'm going to do what makes sense. This makes sense to me, and wow, that's exactly what I wanted. I'm so happy. That's so great. Okay, so I'm not so happy that the lids are, failed. And, they do say that you don't have to soak them, but I might start putting them in hot water, not get them boiling, but maybe that will help my failure rate. But like I said, I did order some Harvest Guard lids. That's a reusable lid with a rubber gasket. And I'm pretty hopeful that I will have better rates of sealing, because, you go through all the trouble. You don't really want things to not seal. Okay, well, that's enough of that. Thanks for watching, and thanks for joining me on the Suburban Edge. If you like this content, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Also, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. I put out new content at least once a week, usually twice. So, hey, hang out with me. Get to know me.